All right. Well, hello, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to Meditative Drawing. I'm Lorraine Maffa, Programming Coordinator with Loudoun County Public Library, and your host today. Feel free to type any comments or questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to help you during the program. It is my pleasure to introduce our artist today, Mekhla Salimani. Design has always been part of Mekhla's life, education, and profession. She has a degree in architecture and product design and took up drawing and painting to help relax and distress from a demanding and stressful career. Mekhla shares her love of art by teaching drawing and painting classes to all ages and by donating many of the proceeds from the sales of her work. Welcome, Mekhla.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Welcome, everyone. All right, Lorraine, so are we good to go?
Yeah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you, Lorraine, for giving me the opportunity to share this with others who may benefit from drawing. And thank you to LCPL for all the amazing activities that you organize for the community. So I am just honored to be a part of this. For everyone on the line joining us today, welcome and thank you for spending your hour with us today. As the name suggests, meditative drawing, we are going to be doing this to really be able to let go of the daily stresses, not set very high bar for us that we are going to create an art piece. But trust me, you will create something that you'll be amazed at, and you will be able to identify so many ways to implement that. But that's not the goal. What we would like to do today is just be in the moment. Take some time to not worry about setting a goal or telling yourself that, hey, I have to create this piece of art. We want no pressure. We don't want any targets. I think most of us deal with that in our daily lives, whether it's our work, our family, our personal goals, health, or whatever that may be. So for just a little bit, we will set that aside. Unlike many other art programs or drawing classes that you may attend, you will start with something as a sample, or you will all get aligned on, hey, this is what we are going to create together. Today, it's quite the opposite. I will not show you a sample or a picture until you've already done something by yourself. The idea being, we want to slow down. We really don't want to have a competition with anyone else or our own selves. Yes, we all agree that we want to continuously improve. But for today, just for this moment, just for this hour, we are not going to compare to anything. What we do is the best we can do, and the idea is not to create anything outside of expectations. It is for us to spend this time focusing. So as you see here, do not compare. It's not a competition. There is no right or wrong to what you will do today. So to get you all started, as you see on the screen here, I have some very basic material. I have pieces of white paper and pens, just black fine tip pen. If you see, I have some cardstock here, which is a little bit thicker, but I also have printer paper, which is easy access and allows me to just try more and not worry about the material I've invested in it. What I also have here is a variety of pens you could use. Now, if you were doing this a lot more, I would recommend you to get some of these fine tip drawing pens. Micron is one of the many companies that does this. When you go to the store, you will see that these pens come in different thicknesses. You see a 0.1 here, a 0.5 here, you would get a 0.3 and others. They are the thickness of the tip of the pen. So you see here, you'll get different quality of lines or thickness of lines. But you don't need this for this class. And in fact, I am not going to use it too. You could also get a fine tip Sharpie. This is just a very fine tip. unlike your thick Sharpie markers. And something as basic and simple as this BIC velocity. It's what you would use to do your regular work with pen. I'm going to use this. This works just fine too. This is actually one of my favorite pens. I do recommend that you cut your paper into postcard size. Why do I say so? Because we want to keep it small. It's really important that this is not intimidating or this is not too much pressure to fill up the entire paper. And when it's small, I think you can use it in many ways to create little note cards or cards, just many different ways. The idea is to keep it small. We don't want to make it so large that we can't finish it, and then we don't feel the connection with what we are drawing. Then it becomes about either it's incomplete, so you don't feel good about it, or you are too tired and exhausted to finish it and doesn't leave you feeling good about it. So keep it small. Start small, start less, and finish more. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. Actually, I take that back. Before we get into it, I will be working on this in 4 steps, but I encourage you not to get worried about keeping up. Even if you're on step 1 till the end of the class, that's just fine, because we will be building upon the first step, and I'll be sharing more ideas on how you could add more design elements to the same pattern making. So you won't really miss out on anything. You will just have those ideas, and if you take this back and do it another time, you'll have many more options to work with. Right, with that, we'll start. This is my first postcard size white paper. And while it is postcard size, I'm going to divide it into smaller sections. You could use a straight edge, like a scale like this. But again, this is not about creating anything perfect. It's about just enjoying the moment and drawing. So I am not going to use a straight edge. And I am okay if my lines are not absolutely straight. That's perfectly fine. So I'm going to divide the space into 6 sections like this. 6 sections because we are going to try 6 different patterns. Once you get started, the patterns you could create are endless. You yourself will realize that halfway into this, you are ready to try a variation. Please feel free to do that. So I'm going to start here with one of the sections, and all I am going to do is draw lines. As you all know, you can all draw lines and curved lines, straight lines and curved lines. Most of us write in one language or another. Every language, the letters have straight lines and curved lines. That's all we need to do everything we are doing today. I recommend you start from the shorter side of this rectangle, not the longer. As you start drawing these lines, you will see that your hand starts to get comfortable. It is following a repeated pattern, so it gets better. The quality of your line will be more stable, straighter. You see what I'm doing here? Let me get it closer to the camera. It's just simple straight lines. Now, not always will you get a straight line. What if my hand just happens to create a line that is not parallel to the previous lines? You see that? And that's okay. We are not creating a perfect picture that we have in mind. In fact, we will go with the flow. If that happens, that's fine. Now I create a pattern that follows a new angle, and that's perfectly fine. Now there are many ways I could fill in the little gap that happened, which only you know that you couldn't create a straight line, but it could be a way to create interest in your design. So I'm going to take this as an opportunity to still do lines, but do vertical lines in that space. The more I draw, the better the lines get. I have more control over it. You see here? And trust me, this was not planned. I know I'm going to teach this class. I know I'm going to be doing lines, but I didn't know what I was going to, what variation I would bring into it. Now that I've done the vertical lines, I'm thinking how about add vertical lines to this section too. Now I encourage you to do what you feel like doing. You don't have to follow exactly the way I am doing it. All you're doing is horizontal and vertical lines. In my next section, I will continue to work with lines but do diagonal lines. If you are not very comfortable with lines, I would recommend that you don't make them too close together. You might get a little overwhelmed filling the space. So whatever you're comfortable with the spacing, go with it. I am a person who doesn't have patience. After I do it a few times, I want to change it. I want to swap it. I want to make it a little bit different. And that's where I am right now. I want to break the monotony. One of the many design principles is to break the monotony. That's when we say, oh, it's boring or I don't find it interesting, is because it repeats way too many times. So something you could always do is break the monotony. Now that's how I'm feeling in this space here. So I'm going to just pick one of these and add lines just the way we've been doing to one of the sections in a different direction. What I'm trying to do is create a little bit more interest to a repeating pattern. All right. Now we'll try some curves. So in the next section, we'll bring some curved lines in. I'm pretty sure we all know to write the letter C or D. And you see, I'm starting with the curved line in the corner here, right there. And I am pretty sure I'm going to get bored of these curves very soon. Or I might just not do a good curve. You see, I just strayed away from the expected path by mistake. That's okay. I'm going to start something different on this corner and make that part of the pattern. There is no one way to do it. There is no right way to do it. And there is no wrong way to do it. Just take the time to do it. And every now and then, step back, take a look at it, reflect on it, see if you're feeling that it's a pleasant composition. And if it's not, ask yourself what could be missing. We just did curves. So we did straight lines, we did slanting lines, and we did curves. Let's start combining some of these. In this next section, we will try to fill in the space with straight lines and curved lines. You see here, I took one of the straight lines and put some half circles or the letter C around it. I might want to add another one, just like the curves we did. 2 curves. And I'll continue that along the others. Sometimes there are patterns that I like, sometimes not so much. And that's okay, because I am learning with each of these on what is pleasing to my eye and what isn't. The more I do, the more I know the ones that look good for me, and I have that as an option for the future. One thing you can be sure is you will never create the same thing twice, unless you are a machine who produces repetitive stuff, which I think none of us are. That is where this is creative and unique, because each time you go for it, you will find a new way to do it. I'm not entirely sure if I like this, but that's okay. I could spend more time making it interesting, or I could move on. I think I'm going to try different patterns. Staying with the curves, I'm going to go with circles. I could just fill the space with circles. And after you do a few, you will realize it's hard to create the same size circles because we are not using any tools to do this. This is real, handmade, unique. So if you find yourself in the situation where the circles are different sizes, make that the character of your work. How about just make the design to be of varying sizes? While I'm trying, these circles are not really the same size or perfect shape. That's okay. I am going to introduce some really small ones and mix it all up. What I'm doing here is taking away the focus from the size of the circle to the variety and the way it is spread. What I'm trying to do is to balance the two sizes of circles. Balance is another important design principle that you would use when you're creating any composition. If I want to further take away the focus, remember we just did lines. We all know to do lines. I'm going to find a few larger circles and fill it in with some line pattern. As you all may know, every pattern creates a different illusion. Sometimes just the pattern you use may make an object look bigger or smaller. So you know that even if your circles were a perfect size, they wouldn't look that way because of the pattern you've introduced. And that's the beauty of this. It is not about perfection. And we will find a combination of these to make a pattern in the sixth space here. As you're working on that, I'd like to show you some drawings of lines and patterns I've done before to just give you some ideas on how this could work. This is a similar postcard size white paper. Straight lines overlapped by horizontal, vertical, and in diagonal lines, dots, circles, and dots. And as you see, if you just do simple dots like this one, the density of dots will start to give you a third dimension here. You will start to see 3D objects. Isn't that amazing? It's just simple dots. It's the density that creates the feel of a third dimension. If you look here, these are waves. And a wave gone wrong, we introduce those little oval shapes in the middle to create an interesting pattern there. Similar to what we did with curves, this has triangles. And these are curves overlapped with a lot of those. This could be a pretty dense design and it always looks very pretty. So let's try that in this section here. I almost want to start with this wave. I'm going to continue along the wave. And every now and then you'll find yourself not being able to follow the perfect shape. And that's when you create something interesting. Break the monotony and create interest. While I'm at that, I want to change the direction of the curve here and do it the other way. You know what? I was not thinking about this before, but to me now, if I look at it, this could be waves. And I just got the idea, how about I do something like a rising sun here? So if I had to turn this around, I'm starting to see something in here. The waves. Oh, it's probably the other way around. And the sun. Well, you just never know what you're going to create. That makes me feel like I'm going to do some waves looking like the radiating rays of the sun. Right. I'll pause there. Lorraine, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions yet, Mekhla.
All right, I'll continue on. I do want to make a point here. When we talk about balance, we are all tuned to thinking about symmetry. But in design, symmetry is not the only way to create balance. Sometimes you could do that. And often more interesting is when you have something asymmetric, but you balance it by the density of pattern, by colors, or just the placement of different patterns. So we will try to do that in the next step as we take this to creating another pattern here. So as we just created all these, we are now going to start to create a composition. So it's not so sectional like this. This is our warm up, and we will take this into the next step. I'm going to use my next piece of paper here, which is also a postcard size. Now what I'd like to do here is to have two options for all of you who are following along. One, we could go with free-flowing curved lines, or we could go with straight lines. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here's another piece of paper. So if I were to do straight lines, I'm telling myself I'm going to divide this in a non-sectional way like we just did and have a little bit more interest so it's not boring sections, 6 equal size sections, right? So I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to use 5 or 6 lines in different directions to divide the space. I choose to go this way, 1. Now I don't want to follow the same direction to make it more interesting. So I'm going to do this. Now I realize I'm going all left to right. So I'm going to try to do something top to bottom going in this direction. Now I feel like that I have some good spaces here, but not so many here. So how about I break this really large space? Do that. Now this looks a little empty here. So I have 2 lines going top to bottom, 2 going left to right. What should I do? I want to break this space. So this is larger and this is smaller. So I'm going to probably go from here. And I really don't know what I plan to do. As I'm speaking to you, I am looking at this and I realize I've created too many small spaces here. So I need to break it a little bit in another direction. And that may be it. I'll just pause at that, or maybe give it a little bit here. This is too large. You see how I'm just reflecting on it and choosing my next step. All right. So as I started saying, there are two options. We could use straight lines, or we could do free-flowing curved lines, similar to what we just did. So I'm going to give myself the freedom to just go with one big curve and maybe another curve. How about breaking these large spaces into this? Now, as you're working on this, I would encourage you and recommend that you don't have very large spaces because you might just get tired doing the same pattern. Not too small, not too large. So let's break this a little and then break this a little bit. I think I can work with this. Now, the next few minutes, I'm not going to speak, so you are able to take a few minutes to just focus and enjoy the process. It is all about the quiet time for you to relax and focus. No need to rush. Slow down and enjoy the process. This may be upside down. Take a few minutes to repeat some of the patterns you did before and create some new ones as you explore lines and curves. As you can see here, I went with a very dense pattern of closely packed lines. When you do that, it's important that you choose the pattern on the adjacent sides accordingly. If you do another dense pattern in the spaces around it, you might have a very heavy, visually heavy looking side of your composition. This is what I mean by balance. If this is dense, I would probably put something a little bit more sparse here so that I can balance the visual density throughout the composition. To balance, I'm thinking that while this is dense, I might just pick another area on the other side with a similar dense pattern. So I'm balancing on the two sides. It's not the exact weight, but the eye recognizes these as visual balances. So we want to create that in our composition. In this case, to do that, I took guidance from the curve that was already there and I followed along. It's not perfect, but when everything comes together, the eye is not looking for perfection. It's looking for the overall appeal of the composition. Now I'm coming back to this space and I want to do something that is different to create a little bit of contrast, again, to create interest. At the same time, I want to change the density of pattern there. So what would I do? I'm going to do the curves, but spread out. Now between the two curves, I'm going to put another layer of that. It's allowing me to change the direction and fill the spaces. If you later decide that this should be even denser, there are ways you could do that. So you see we have the curves. Now I'm going to pick just one or two to add a little bit more interest to it with straight line patterns. Within this space, I'm trying to create that visual balance. So they are not clustered in one part of this. You see, I'm making a decision here. I want something in this section, but I don't know if this would be too close to this. I want it here. I'm in a fix. Let's go with that. All right, maybe one more here. Continuing on. I have straight lines here and I have curves here. So I want something straight line in this space. Otherwise, these would be too similar. So I'm going to try to do some straight line pattern. It seems like I'm going with a triangle shape. Although I think I want to break that. So I see there's a larger gap here. I might want to introduce another line here. The best job. I think I want something a little bit more delicate, so I'm just going to do some small circles. Just trying to evenly spread those out. Now I think These circles would be a nice addition to this side to balance it out. I think I just needed that. I like how they are spread out and I have something that's repeating there. Sometimes too much variety would be clutter. And that's when we say, oh, that's kitsch, oh, that's too much. So you want the comfort of familiarity. And that's when repetition actually helps. So neither of these design principles are good or bad. I think a good mix of all of them is what we want for a pleasing, harmonious design. I want to repeat this curve somewhere around here. Since this is on the edge, I don't want the other one to be on the edge. Because I'm thinking if I do that, it might start to look like a frame, which I don't want to use this pattern as a frame. So I'm going to put it in here. So it's a similar curved pattern. As I'm drawing this, I'm reminding myself to not be too hard on myself. As I look at it, I'm thinking, this is not my best. But is that the purpose? No, I have to remind myself that I'm doing this to really enjoy the process. And it's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay to give yourself a chance and not be too hard. And once I complete this, I will have an opportunity to come back and add more details and change a few things if I want to, or not, or maybe bring some color into it. We have these repeating, we have some balance here. I want to put something in here that is not too different, but I'm not a fan of these triangles, so I want to do something else here. That's a curve. I want something in straight lines. I might do a straight line pattern and break it with something. So that's straight lines. And I'll bring the triangles back, but a different way this time. I realized when I did the triangles here, I didn't have any control over the space and how it was distributed. So in this one, I did it a little bit more structured. I put it in between lines. So I had a better control over how I'm going to put the pattern in the space. I need a little bit more density, so I'm adding a little additional small triangles in there. As you see here, we are just repeating a simple pattern, just creating variations of the same. I might actually put some dashed lines in here. So much easier to do shorter lines than long straight lines. And what we did was create a completely different pattern. I am going to repeat that here because it's a little removed from it. And honestly, I enjoyed doing it. I want to do more of it. And I'm going to go for it because that's what I want to do. There are no rules. You will find yourself enjoying some patterns more than the other. And the more you do it, they will get better and they will become a repeating feature in your work. You'll tend to go for that whenever you're looking for a pattern to fill in. That's how signature styles evolve. Right, I have two spaces. I'm going to fill this with straight lines. It's a small space, a dense design wouldn't hurt. But me being me, I want to add a little something to break the monotony. So I added some dots. And this is a large space, the last space that's remaining. I think curves would be good because I have some lines around it. Let's try to do a wave. And we can change how far or closely packed those are. Giving myself the freedom to fill a free flowing space. If you see this composition right now, I'm not seeing a lot of contrast. Contrast is usually necessary to bring out the profile of the shape. So I'm going to try to make some areas a little bit denser. Now there are two ways you could do it. You may or may not have a pencil right now, and that's okay. One, using the same pen, I will go ahead and make this pattern dense in the middle. I could do dots, but in the interest of time today, I am staying away from dots. Dots are a great way to create some shades, lighter or darker areas. And I'm going to switch over to a regular pencil. And if you want to create some areas with a little bit more dark, you can just do a light shade with the pencil. Now, if you had colored pencils, you could do that too. I'm staying with the black and white theme here and just using the pencil to create a little bit darker spaces. I know my lines are not perfect. I know the curves are not perfect, but I don't think anyone can tell except for me. So I have to be kind to myself and remind myself of what I am doing this for. What is the purpose, and not worrying about the tiny details that really don't matter. And we could do other spaces too. I'm going to pause here and show you a couple of samples that were done with exactly the same basic guidelines as we discussed just now. So like I talked to you about, we could have done the same thing with straight lines, as you saw in this. We did that with curved lines. And here I have two samples for you to see. The one with the orange border is a straight line composition. Very simple, basic patterns. This other one here is similar to what I showed you, curved line composition. As you see here, I've introduced a little bit of color. In these, colors are great for highlighting, but it's important to remember that we don't want to overdo it. And less is more in a lot of design things. Usually the most pleasing compositions or art are the minimal ones. So important point to remember is less is more. Focus on the value you would get by adding that element than just going after a lot of volume. In this one, just a hint of color as a border makes your design pop. Whereas on this one, it allows you to differentiate between some spaces, so you've created more interest. Now, if I were to buy a card or put this on cardstock, I am fairly certain that this will be more unique and it'll have your personal touch to it. If you were to put this on a flat card, you could use this for various occasions to tell someone that you care for a special person or a special occasion. With a simple variation, if you were to use holiday colors on this, depending on the holiday you celebrate, this would become a unique holiday card. If you were to use colors for other occasions or someone's favorite color, you would be personalizing it for them. Now, this is not it. The two steps we did today are both fairly simple, and what you could do with it, the options, the ideas, the possibilities are endless. I want to take the next few minutes to show you of the many different types of things you could create with just these simple lines and curves as patterns. I would like to start with one so you can follow or see what I'm talking about and share some samples with you. This is another piece of paper here. And since we are transitioning into the fall season, I'm thinking that I'm going to do a fall card. It could be for Thanksgiving. It could be for someone who loves the fall season, to tell them that you know what they like. And I'm going to go with a leaf pattern. Now I'm going away from just dividing the space into a composition and actually drawing something. This could be an easy leaf to draw. And of course, you can create many different leaf shapes, pumpkin, corn, apple, so many ways to think of the beautiful things in fall. So here's my pattern. Now, another important concept that we should know and think about when we create a composition is the positive and negative space. We are used to coloring into the picture we draw. So this would be the space that's positive, that's inside the design. What is around it, which creates the backdrop, is called the negative space. So inside the leaf would be positive, everything around is negative space. Well, there's nothing positive or negative about it. Trust me, sometimes negative, if there was no negative space, we wouldn't be appreciating the positive. So there are two ways you could treat this. You could decide to fill inside the leaves with patterns that we just created and leave everything else white. Or the other option would be to create the background with a dense pattern and let the positive pop with the background that you've created with patterns. Let me show you an example. This was something I drew for Valentine's Day. You see here, the negative space has design and the positive space is left untouched. What we are doing here is creating interest or the focus of attention to the positive picture you've drawn by putting pattern on the outer side. We are at 4:53, so I am just going to use this as an example, not go into doing the patterns, but you could do some repeating patterns. Quick few ideas here. Straight lines on one side of the leaf. And maybe dots on the other side. I could choose to repeat this pattern on every leaf, or I can make each leaf unique with different patterns. When I say the possibilities are endless, they really are. I'd like to take us to the next step, which is definitely optional, but something you could try. A hint of color sometimes just elevates the whole design. I'm going to use the same leaf pattern. And I have a simple orange marker here. And I'm thinking I want to add just a little bit of color. So I might just go around the leaves and do an orange outline. Something as simple as that, but it's communicating that I'm thinking of the warm colors of autumn. Don't need a lot of color to say that, just a hint of that to highlight it and to communicate. With some of these basic simple, everyday line types and patterns, you could create endless different compositions. This is one that I recently started, I haven't finished, and that's why I remind myself, keep it small. This is something like a streetscape or a skyline of very tall buildings. Is this upside down? Well, maybe this is right. I'm sorry if I've been doing this wrong the whole time. No, this may be right. All right. So you see, you don't have to be a perfectionist to give the idea of what you're thinking and to be able to reproduce it in a picture. That's tall buildings. This here could be a winter landscape. I hope in this hour you realize that none of this is complicated, none of this is difficult. You don't have to be an artist who's learned art to be able to do this. But I am very sure that when you just give yourself time to focus and tell yourself that you can create art without being pressured into it, you will surprise yourself. I'd like to share a few other things that I've done before. This is not to overwhelm you, because now you know that all of these have been created with some very simple patterns that you all can create. Now, this is actually even simpler than what you've created. It is a card I drew to share with friends and family and got these printed. Each of these is a section, just like we did in our very first warm-up exercise, and use this to create a small composition. There are hints of flowers, trees, fishes, and repeating patterns here. I would love to hear back from you if any of you took some of these ideas and made cards for your loved ones to tell them how much you care while you are taking the time to relax and enjoy the process yourself. Sharing a few other samples. This is using a free-flowing form, creating a sun. Each ray has a different pattern. And just like we discussed, this has just a hint of yellow. And that's all you need for the sun to pop. No idea is too simple. You can always make it interesting. One day I asked my kids, what should I draw today? My son randomly, without thinking, said pineapple. So I said, pineapple it is. And I drew a pineapple. Now, there are days when you are out of ideas or you just don't know what you want to create. This is from a day like that. I just started off not knowing where I was going. And that was okay. I created an abstract composition using the same principles that we talked about today. A little bit of contrast, a little bit of balance, a little bit of breaking of the symmetry, and thinking about placing them in different places to create an interesting composition. I'd like to close this with another composition that I created when I was sharing this with my folks back in India when they were struggling with COVID not too long ago. It's a combination of color and black and white, thinking about the positive and negative spaces. And I wanted to put a message in there. I said, stay strong, light will shine. With that, I'd like to wrap up the class today, but I hope that this is only the beginning of a journey for you. I hope that you all continue along this. And if you could share what you've tried, that would be absolutely wonderful to see how you are applying it and how you are creating your very own unique compositions.